Hey there everyone, have you ever looked at a map of the United States and wondered, how did it get to be so big? It didn't happen by accident. Today we're diving into the fascinating story of how the USA went from a bunch of colonies huddled on the East Coast to one of the largest countries in the world. How did the USA become one of the largest countries in the world? What territories did they buy, and at what cost? From coast to coast, the story of the United States is a story of expansion, and often it's a story of deals, treaties, and yes, sometimes even conflict. Over the next few minutes we'll journey through some of the most significant land acquisitions in U.S. history, exploring how these territories helped shape the nation we know today. Get ready to learn about forgotten treaties, surprising bargains, and the impact these expansions had on the people who already called these lands home. This is more than just memorizing dates and names on a map, it's about understanding how the USA became the global power it is today. Our story begins in 1803 with a deal so good it's almost unbelievable. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, is now president. He's eyeing a vast territory west of the Mississippi River, controlled by France. This land, known as the Louisiana Territory, was enormous, over 828,000 square miles. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, was initially reluctant to sell, but France was embroiled in costly wars in Europe, and Napoleon needed cash. So Napoleon offered to sell the entire Louisiana Territory to the United States. And the price? A measly $15 million? The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States overnight, but this expansion came at a cost for Native American tribes. Our next chapter takes us south, to the sun-drenched peninsula of Florida. Unlike the Louisiana Purchase, acquiring Florida involved a bit more diplomacy. In the early 1800s, Florida was a Spanish territory, and it was becoming a thorn in the side of the United States. The border between the U.S. and Spanish Florida was porous, and tensions were running high. There were skirmishes with Seminole tribes who had sought refuge in the area, and escaped slaves sometimes fled across the border seeking freedom in Spanish territory. Enter, stage left, the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. This agreement, named for John Quincy Adams and the Spanish Foreign Minister Luis de Onis, saw Spain hand over Florida to the United States. In return, the U.S. agreed to assume some financial claims against Spain and to relinquish any claims it had to Texas. The acquisition of Florida was a strategic win for the United States, solidifying control over the southeastern border and eliminating a potential source of conflict with Spain. Remember how I said the U.S. had its eyes on Texas? Well, let's talk about how that played out. Texas in the 1830s was a wild, untamed land, sparsely populated by Europeans and primarily controlled by Mexico. The Mexican government, hoping to encourage settlement, had allowed some American settlers to come in and establish colonies. However, these American settlers, accustomed to a certain degree of autonomy and unhappy with Mexican rule, eventually revolted. This rebellion culminated in the famous Battle of the Alamo in 1836, a pivotal moment in Texan history. Though the Texans fought bravely, they were ultimately defeated by the Mexican army at the Alamo. But the Alamo became a rallying cry for the Texan cause. Under the leadership of Sam Houston, the Texans eventually defeated the Mexican army at the Battle of San Jacinto, securing their independence. For a brief period, Texas existed as an independent republic. The Republic of Texas, with its own flag, constitution, and government. After years of debate and negotiation, Texas was finally annexed by the United States in 1845, becoming the 28th state. So far, our journey westward has taken us through land acquired by purchase, treaty, and even a bit of revolution. But the story of the Oregon Territory is one of negotiation and, dare I say, compromise. The Oregon Territory was a massive expanse of land in the Pacific Northwest, stretching from present-day California all the way up to British Columbia. Both the United States and Great Britain had claims to this territory, and for decades they had an agreement to jointly occupy the land. But as more and more American settlers began trekking westward along the Oregon Trail, the desire for the U.S. to control the territory grew stronger. Tensions were high, and for a while, it seemed like war with Great Britain over Oregon was a real possibility. But cooler heads prevailed, and in 1846, the two countries signed the Oregon Treaty. This treaty amicably divided the Oregon Territory along the 49th parallel. giving the U.S. what is now Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and parts of Montana and Wyoming. The Oregon Treaty secured U.S. access to the Pacific coast, which was essential for trade and expansion. In the mid-19th century, U.S. expansion took a dramatic turn. The annexation of Texas led to the Mexican-American War in 1846. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 ended the war, reshaping North America. Mexico ceded vast territories including California, Nevada, and Utah. A year later, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, sparking the gold rush. Fortune seekers transformed California into a bustling hub. The Mexican Cession displaced many Mexicans and Native Americans. By the 1850s, the United States had achieved its manifest destiny, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But there was still one more piece of the puzzle to fall into place. Enter the Gadsden Purchase, a seemingly minor land deal that would have a lasting impact on the U.S.-Mexico border. After the Mexican-American War, there was still some ambiguity about the exact location of the border between the U.S. and Mexico in what is now southern Arizona and New Mexico. This became a problem because the U.S. was eager to build a southern transcontinental railroad, and the most practical route ran through this disputed territory. In 1853, James Gadsden negotiated a deal with the Mexican government to purchase a 30,000 square mile strip of land south of the Gila River. This land, known as the Gadsden Purchase, cost the U.S. $10 million, a hefty sum at the time, especially considering it was mostly desert. The Gadsden Purchase finalized the continental U.S. border as we know it today, and facilitated the construction of the Southern Transcontinental Railroad. Now let's fast forward a few years and travel north to the frozen expanse of Alaska. In 1867, in a move that was widely ridiculed at the time, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia for a grand total of $7.2 million. That's right, the U.S. essentially paid 2 cents an acre for a landmass twice the size of Texas. The purchase was spearheaded by William Seward, Secretary of State under President Andrew Johnson. Seward was a firm believer in U.S. expansion, seeing Alaska as a strategic asset in the Pacific. However, many Americans saw it as a frozen wasteland, dubbing it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox. Little did they know that Alaska held hidden treasures. In the decades that followed, gold was discovered in the Klondike region, sparking a gold rush that brought thousands of prospectors north. Later, oil and other natural resources were discovered, transforming Alaska's economic fortunes. Our journey through U.S. expansion takes us next to the Pacific Ocean, to the volcanic archipelago of Hawaii. Unlike previous acquisitions, which were largely driven by negotiations or conflict with other colonial powers, the story of Hawaii's annexation is more complex, marked by internal power struggles and the growing influence of U.S. business interests. In the late 19th century, Hawaii was an independent kingdom, ruled by a monarchy. However, the islands had become increasingly important to U.S. business interests, particularly sugar planters, who had established large plantations and wielded significant economic and political power. In 1893, a group of these businessmen, with the support of U.S. Marines who had landed on the islands, staged a coup, overthrowing the Hawaiian Queen Liliuokalani. The businessmen established a provisional government and sought annexation by the United States. While President Grover Cleveland initially opposed the coup, his successor, William McKinley, was more receptive to the idea. In 1898, Hawaii was officially annexed by the United States, becoming a U.S. territory. As the 19th century drew to a close, the United States found itself in conflict with Spain. The Spanish-American War in 1898 marked the U.S. emergence as a global power. Spain ceded Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the U.S. The Philippines resisted U.S. rule, leading to the Philippine-American War. From the Louisiana Purchase to the annexation of Hawaii, we've covered a lot of ground in this video. Literally. And it's clear that the United States wouldn't be the country it is today without these territorial acquisitions. These lands provided resources, strategic advantages, and a vast canvas on which the American story unfolded. But this expansion wasn't without its consequences. The displacement of Native American tribes, the institution of slavery in new territories, and the often brutal subjugation of other peoples are dark chapters in this narrative. As we marvel at the sheer size and diversity of the U.S., it's essential to remember the complexities and contradictions that shaped its growth. So, as you look at a map of the United States today, I hope you see more than just state lines and geographical features. I hope you see a tapestry woven from ambition, conflict, compromise, and the relentless pursuit of opportunity.